culture as being considered for a long time as either a low culture or low art in comparison to art as painting, sculpture, and theater. Subsequently, pop culture has become such a huge phenomenon where it's on a massive scale influencing behavior and perceptions and consequent identity building of a vast majority of the population. When we're talking about occultism within pop culture, and especially the sacred in the occult, I was thinking how to actually define the secret in the occult. I was searching high and low, left and right, and then I figured out that basically going back to Emil Durkheim is probably like the best way of defining it, where he goes somehow simple. He goes that the sacred is regarded in certain beliefs, personas, institutions, practices as such, or places as such by the practitioners. On the other hand, occult can be considered as, from the cognitive perspective, as counterintuitive, and at the same time, it's having a normative significance. So we can see that these two elements are basically very nicely interconnected. It's, and as we showed in pop culture, it's important for the practitioners or for the people who are having some kind of a significant interest within the topic. And in that case, one and the same element can be considered sacred within the occult for one magician and not sacred for another magician, despite him being from the same movement, because it's having a very strong personal element to that. Now that we are having this sacred in the occult in the other way, I was thinking that another layer that we have to peel is how the occult in pop culture is existing, or how the pop culture in the occult is existing. And here I have stumbled upon the expression of mimesis. Mimesis, which can be traced back to Plato at least, maybe even pre-Platonian philosophers. And after Plato and Aristotle, basically every of the major names, these household names of philosophy, so Freud, Nietzsche, Jung, Adorno, Foucault, and so many others were working with the idea of mimesis. Mimesis is basically imitation. Imitation, where the idea that art imitates life. Life is considered nature. Nature, when it creates the perfect shapes and the perfect templates that are worthy of reproduction. That's why art is trying to mimic what nature is creating on its own. But then come here Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was one of the most prominent proponents of the term of anti-mimesis, which is life imitates art, which is basically the expression turned over. How can we understand this? It's mostly on the behavioral pattern of research. Is nature may be creating some archetypes, some patterns, but art creates an idealized version of it, or a perfect version of it. Subsequently, people, again, life or nature, finds these perfect examples appealing and tries to somehow conform to them. This might be even difficult to do because they present these unobtainable ideals of either behavior or aesthetics, but it's still like the strive is still there. This is basically what is happening in social media, where there are presented some unobtainable standards and people are trying to somehow justify their behavior based on this. Who is from my generation probably remembers when we were small, everybody wants to be the girls, either Barbie, the guys, He-Man. Neither of those was unattainable, but we were still striving. Like it was still something that was considered a way of worthy of following. As you can probably see, this anti-mimesis is what I consider like very important within this connection of pop culture and the occult. Where can we see like these first examples? And probably everybody of you know about the Ouija board. The Ouija board patented. The patent was handed in the US Patent Office already in 1891 by Elijah Bond, but the form we are currently, most of us are knowing, is a little bit later. It's connected with a guy called William Falt, and it's from 1902. But they were basically colleagues, so they were inspired by each other. But what I found interesting is that the Ouija board, as we all know, it's meant for contacting the dead, is very, very strongly inspired by the previous spiritualist movements, which was huge in the in the late or middle 19th century. But since both of Bond and Falt were basically businessmen, they were not occultists, they were not magicians, they were not scholars, they were businessmen, they were promoting the Ouija board as a parlor game or a family game. And interestingly enough, that I was searching about that, the initial phase, when it was issued like to the broader public as a entertaining game for the evening, they were having no instructions how to use them. There was just that this is the thing you can use to contact the afterlife. And as I was mentioning, parlor game, family game. So basically what they were saying is, in other words, you can have a pleasant evening with your family and necromancy. This, and as if you're following current trends in depictions of the Ouija board or like pop culture representations, it has made full circle. While it came from spiritualism as a movement, through this more general appeal of the game, of like non-hostile, non-occult game, currently the Ouija board is again used by many magicians as a way to contacting the deceased, and it's considered a very important element as of the design, also of the practice. In my graphical design practice, many of the people who are asking for my designs want me to implement parts of the Ouija board because they want to use it in their necromantic practices. Now we have that out of the table, so we can go to the final question at hand. Are there sacred spaces in occultism, and how do we create sacred spaces in occultism? Because in comparison to religions, occultism, and especially when we're talking about the modern movements in occultism, are strongly syncretic. We are very rarely in this technological age finding something as a centralized temples or something that could be considered a central gathering sacred space. And it's more particular on the individual practitioners. Basically, it's also reflecting the current age of individuality, where everybody is a magician on their own. They might be connected through some ideology, they might be even having contacts, but everybody is usually doing the rituals on their own. Basically, then creating the sacred space means how you, as a magician, approach your ritual practice and how you limit it in contrast to the mundane world out there. So when I was thinking, how could we be defining what could be considered a sacred space in occultism, I have come back again to Durkheim, as I was saying previously. I have found the idea of this normative significance. It defines the behavior and the practice and the intention. In that way, you can be basically building altars. You can be building altars in your living room, and that is becoming your sacred space. Now I will be showing you some examples that I created these 3 categories till now. Maybe I will find more as I'm continuing my research of how this pop culture has captured the ideas of occultism, because I'm sorry for my case. Pop culture is becoming something as a very important container of conveying occult ideas. It's basically encrypting the encrypted. As occult means the not revealed or the hidden, occult considers the esoteric knowledge, which is something that you have to obtain that is not available to the public. And pop culture, as a general phenomenon of consumerism, is basically using these elements, but as we will see, sometimes not in a superficial way, but the authors know what they were doing. They are basically encrypting the knowledge within a very easily digestible way, and then present it into the public, and the public is then it's their decision if they are going to be considering this knowledge worthy of seeking, or if they consider it just a fast-paced entertainment. So I have, as I mentioned, I have made 3 categories of sacred spaces within pop occultism. I use it as a term of pop occultism, all connected to aesthetics, and displaced bound instances as the first category. Could be also called the most tangible ones. On the left one, you can see that some very random average Wiccan Wiccan altar. On the right is a scene from the game Silent Hill 3, which is an altar of the cult order, which is called the Order. They were very imaginative with the name, they just called the Order or the cult. It's a place where it's visually divided from the mundane world. It's a ritual place, it's a sacred place. But at the same time, it's semi-movable. The altar can be, if you are moving, for example, from the different department, doesn't mean that the place is bound there and for forever it's going to be designed as a sacred space, as a ritual space. You can extinguish the candles, pack your stuff, and create your altar somewhere else. Altars are the most from this semi-movable because we can also mention different examples of these tangible instances. For example, shrines or caves. This is from the actually excellent occult horror movie, The Empty Man, where caves, shrines, something enclosed, something not that very much movable, but still tangible, is also like a very common element that is inspired by folk magic, that is inspired by multiple occult traditions and very heavily enforced and very heavily presented within pop culture. As a different example can be woods and all the elements in the woods. This is the scene for The Kill List, another excellent horror movie. And woods provide a lot of elements that can be considered a sacred place, from trees, meadows, lakes, stones, whatever, these fairy circles made of mushrooms that are somehow averagely found in the forests. And they are, again, considered something that magicians go there. It has some kind of an importance, and it's differentiating the space from the normal world to this sacred space. Maybe more interesting, at least, because this is something that we can find also in different religious traditions, places that are considered sacred within that belief. Is what I call temporary spaces. On the left, probably everybody knows that picture. It's Edward Kelly and John Dee chatting up some ghosts at the cemetery. But what is important is the circle they are standing in. If you check it more closely, you can see the names Raphael, Rael, Tarniel. It's basically, and other ones that are not readable, but it's the names of angels and demons alike, and it's an invocation circle. If you are going with any of these more sigil-based magical traditions from both of the keys of Solomon, lesser and greater key of Solomon, Ars Goetia, Pseudomonarchia Demonum, we have a continuing tradition or intention of geometrical patterns that are used for short-term differentiating of this reality and the alternate reality. Alternate reality, you can call it the occult reality, you can call it the other plane, the other world, hell, heaven, whatever you just wish. But the thing is that when you are doing this practice of either invocation or banishing or protective circles, you are creating a space within that circle that is of importance. What happens in the circle is basically taken out of this place in existence, and it's being projected into the other one. It can be invocation, summoning, banishing, that is something is happening within it, or it can be protection. So anything from outside the circle isn't going to harm you. It's actually a legit practice, but it's also very, very extensively used in media, where they are making these salt circles where ghosts, evil spirits, and something like that can't enter it. And this, if you watch contemporary or like talk to contemporary magicians, they are basically all of them are using this idea of short-term differentiating of space. On the right side, it's basically the same idea, just represented in Japanese animation. That's from the series Full Metal Alchemist. If we want to go something more Western-oriented, another excellent movie, The Dark Song. I didn't find a better picture that will be depicting it, but that woman, that's the main character, is trying to summon an angel to answer her some questions. Watch the movie, it's really good. But what it's not maybe visible is that the circle, she's sitting within the circle, and that's again the invocation circle. So now we are going basically into a little bit more abstract way of of differentiating spaces. First, we had the tangible ones. Those are understandable. Now we have these short-term ones where the space is becoming sacred or ritualistic only for a certain period of time. This story, when we are sticking with this dark song, she is in a cabin. I don't know if it was a cabin in the woods or it was just some house, but the house didn't have no ritual or sacred meaning at all. The sacredness was becoming after the ritual started. And we can assume that after the ritual ended and all this layout was extinguished, deleted, then the house has regained its profane function it had before. The third category that is, I think, the most interesting, or I had the most fun with, is what I call the transitional spaces. And this is nicely connected to, for example, what Andrea was saying about the astral planes, which I will be also mentioning very shortly. It's where you consider that there are different places of planes of existence. We have our normal material world, we have the spiritual world, we have astral plane, and there are like multiple ones depending on which magical traditions you are following. And in certain settings, you can transition between these two planes. And this is not actually explicitly place bound, but it's more depending on the circumstances of the change. So in this case, the space is actually not a space in a physical meaning, but it's the idea of the space. Another example can be from the movie The Void, where this triangle thing is basically a portal between two worlds, ours and this hell dimension. And this idea of the portal is what we are going to be focusing on. I don't have a picture of that, but I remember this one game that is from the 90s. It's very, very heavily occult oriented, and I was playing it when I was younger. I didn't have no intention. The more knowledge I gained, the more symbolism I have found there. It takes place in a city called Sigil, which should have rung a bell already at that time, but it didn't, and which is called also the City of Doors. The City of Doors functions in a way that everything in that philosophy, of the lore, that everything can be a door and everything can be a key. It doesn't have to be necessarily our idea of a door as an opening and as a key as an element of opening that door. A door can be, for example, a place between a chair and a wall, or a place between two shadows cast at a certain time of the day. And a key, other way, doesn't have to be even physical. A key can be a thought, it can be a gesture, can be a word, can be a movement. And you, as a traveler between these planes, basically a magician, your job is to know what is a key and what is a door and how to combine them. And now we're coming to this idea of knowing. Knowing as an important element of knowing the differentiation between the spaces and the transition between these spaces. And when we are talking about knowing and how to advance to certain stages through knowledge, we get what? We get basically knowledge. And knowledge is very much implemented in many of the games, despite it not being directly in your face. It's just hidden there. But if you think about it, the authors basically, again, knew how to approach this topic. These are two examples about knowledge and sacred spaces, the Cultist Simulator and Bloodborne, vastly different ones, but both working with similar concepts. Cultist Simulator is a simulator of creating a cult, as the name suggests. And just a brief background, you are like unemployed person who is contacted by some mysterious character who gets you some ideas that you start to think about. It's a card game, by the way. You start to think about, the more you think about, the more you open another thoughts that could be combined into certain knowledge. And as you gain this knowledge, you are walking on that thing called Manzus. The Manzus is the world of the game, and you are walking towards the glory. You are starting down there, and there's these triangle things at the bottom, these dark ones, those are the woods. That basically represents the closed stage of the consciousness, where you are not getting enough knowledge to be able to transcend into different stages. So as you gain knowledge through thinking, through explorations, through reading, through researching, you are stepping towards these tiny steps of the manzus, towards the glory. The glory is basically ascension or transcending the ideas, the basic knowledge of the humankind. You are walking towards the knowledge of God. Again, we have gnosis very, very nicely in your face. The danger of that knowledge is that you might not be able to prepare to handle the knowledge, and you might go insane. That's as with one game as with the other one. I will now tell you something about the Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a action-filled game, but again, in that lore of the world, through combat, through interactions with different characters, you get what is called insight. As you gather more insight, the world that was previously modeled somehow starts to change. You start to see things that are not there. You interact in a different way. Also the characters react to you in a different way. But here it's getting interesting. The more insight you get, the more you are in danger in going insane. And at the same time, the people who do not have the knowledge within this lore do not believe you that you are seeing those things. So they are describing you as a madman. And this is, again, showing that the dangers of getting the knowledge to understand. Getting the knowledge will visually change the space. The space will become sacred, will become more ritualized, because it's becoming different from the mundane world. And at the same time, is the same one. The space, it doesn't change. It's kind of difficult to explain. The space doesn't change itself in a physical world. Your perception of the space changes through your enhanced knowledge. Just on a funny side note, that ugly spidery thing hanging there, it's called the lesser amygdala. I have no clue why they have chosen the name, because amygdala, but then I probably figured out. Amygdala is basically a part of the brain I think it's in temporal lobes, which are part of the limbic system of the brain, and is responsible for knowledge, emotions, and fear. Some damage to the amygdala can cause difficulty in learning, difficulty in gaining knowledge, as well as difficulty in handling emotions, and maybe leading to mental sicknesses described as insanity. Oh, I'm running out of time. I have just two more slides, so it's fine. Now I'll be talking shortly about the practical applications. And as I was already talking with William, I specialize in the research of chaos magic. Chaos magic can be traced basically back to Austin Osman's pair, as you see him in the middle. It was then getting its momentum in the 70s, as with Peter J. Carroll, as Tancredi was saying, and his two books, Psychonaut and Libernul. But the book I will be talking about, or like the practice I will be talking about, it's about one of the occultists, maybe not that much of a well-known name. He's called Andrej Kapcar. He wrote the book Hands on Chaos Magic. It's like a practical guidebook of how to practice chaos magic. And he describes how to build an astral temple. Now going back to Andrea's topic. In his astral temple, like when you are practicing astral magic, you travel to astral plane, but it's not very much a safe space in chaos magic now, I mean, because every thoughts that you are not controlling can attract spirits, demons, whatever, something that might harm you. The way of avoiding this problem of being in a danger is creating a safe space, what is called the astral temple. Now, as Crowley was saying. But since we are already out of the time of Crowley, we are in the time of modern technology, Vitimus says that you can build the astral temple with whatever suits you and you find appealing and safe. So he explicitly mentions that if you are into Japanese animations and huge battle robots, you can create your temple with 2 huge battle robots guarding them, all these negative influences that can be coming from the outside. If you're into fantasy, if you're into Lord of the Rings, if you're into video games, you can be building your temple to whatever suits your needs and you find comfortable with. And now we see this circle that I was already describing with the Ouija board. All these depictions within the pop culture are taking inspirations from previous occult or esoteric practices. And now they are basically returning through their aesthetical appeal back into the ritual practice. Another example is what is called the memory palace. Memory palace is another thing that that draws back to the antique philosophers, and it's a way to increase the capacity of your memory and memorize insane things. Usually, all these people who are showcasing these incredible memory tasks are using the method of memory palace. It works in a way that in your mind you build a place, hence the memory palace, where you place the things you would like to remember. And when you are trying to get them back, when you are trying to remember it, you remember yourself walking within this palace. And then you see, for example, on the left is the room with the first thing you need to remember. Through that first place, you go into the right, and there is another thing that you want to remember. This is heavily enforced into chaos magic practice of sigilization and also storing memories. Like when you wish to let's say, encode your intention, your magical intention that has to be followed into certain path, you create a memory palace. When I was researching, like, if there is some kind of a modern pop cultural application, of course there is. There are multiple magicians who are claiming that you don't even just have to visualize the memory palace. You can create it in some kind of a virtual environment, as here is shown in the game Minecraft. Minecraft is a sandbox, the game where you have like blocks and you can create whatever, like it's literally limited just with your imagination. And they were creating memory palaces within Minecraft. And how did it help them? On two ways. It served them as a library, or as they calling it, their personal mage tower, because it was a physical space where they were storing their videos, their writings, their ideas, whatever. And at the same time, since they went physically through the process of building these temples, they remembered every room, every nook and cranny. So when they were doing their magical ritual, they just remembered the stuff they already built. They didn't build it with their hands, but at the same time they did, but just in a virtual space. And I think this is my last slide, and I'm out of time anyway, so thank you for your attention.